ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarvagurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with, I think, the seventh proposition in Baladev Vidyabhushan's Prameya Ratnavali. Proposition 7 now is mentioned that the condition of liberation consists of the attainment of Lord Krishna. Okay, so this is, I guess, the proposition is about what is liberation. So thus, in the Swatasvatara Upanishad 111, we have the following. When that God is known, all fetters fall off, sufferings are destroyed, and birth and death cease. So also in the Gopaltapani Upanishad, we have the following. The one controller, all-pervading Krishna, must alone be worshipped, and similar other texts. The Master Krishna himself shines in manifold forms and figures everywhere. By worshipping him, the freed souls dwell happily in his eternal abode. Here ends the seventh proposition on the subject that liberation consists of the attainment of Sri Krishna. So let's have a look and see what the Madhvas say about that. The seventh Prameya or proposition of Vyasatirtha is that moksha is achieved by flawless devotion and correct understanding. But why is moksha liberation even desirable? Why should one not focus on achieving other ends? There are said to be 4 ends that one can strive for. Dharma, or religious spiritual merit, artha, or wealth, kama, or sensory satisfaction, and moksha, mukti, or liberation from the world. Of these, why is moksha the highest? So a quote from Mahabharata, because dharma, etc., are non-everlasting and are always mixed with pain. Dharma, etc., meaning dharma, artha, kama, are not the supreme benefit. Moksha alone is the supreme joy and is beyond the ken of this world. Ken meaning understanding. It's often used in Scottish English. That which the reason why is that gives the reason why it is that moksha should be the primary object of one's striving in preference to the other types of possible benefits. Srimad Ananda Tirtha Madhvacharya says, moksha and other ends are not obtained without Vishnu's grace. Thus, mukti is achieved by the grace of Vishnu and not achieved otherwise is known clearly from several sources. For instance, Skanda Purana says, to the unknowing, Vishnu gives knowledge. To the knowing, he gives moksha. To the liberated, he gives joy, and he alone is fit for all to worship. And also from Bhagavad Gita, those who, having surrendered all actions unto me without fail, perform bhakti yoga, meditate upon and worship me. For them who have imbued me into their consciousness completely, I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of death and material existence. And also from Narayana Shruti, by whose grace alone the greatly suffering are rid of the world and not otherwise. He is Narayana, the Supreme, and the one fit to be contemplated upon by those who seek to be liberated from the binds of karma. What is devotion? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, he who knows me without a doubt as being the Supreme Person, he is considered to know all the scriptures and worships me in all possible ways, O Bharata, Arjuna. Thus, it's necessary to know the Lord's qualities as they are, for otherwise a proper devotion to him is not attained. In the previous verses to this one, which were cited in connection with the first Prameya or proposition, Krishna has defined the exact meaning of Purushottama as being one who is different from and vastly superior to the destructible and the indestructible. How and why may devotion to the Lord be possibly flawed. If one considers oneself to also be the Lord, or to be the same as he, or to be even superior, or if he considers another than the Lord to be supreme, or such, then one's devotion is flawed and will not result in liberation. As Ananda Tirtha puts it from Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya, the significant parts are: 1. Jiva Beda, to consider there to exist intrinsic abeda, or difference between jivas, intrinsic abeda. Beda means difference. Abeda means oneness between the jivas and the Lord. Or nirgunatvam, to consider the Lord to have no attributes or be attributeless. Apurna gunata, to consider the Lord as not as having limited abilities, quality and or quantity. Samya, to consider oneself or some other entity to be equal to him. Adikyam tadanyesham, to consider oneself or some other entity to be superior to the Lord. Bedastad gata eva cha, to consider his incarnations to be different from him or from each other in worth or value. Pradhurbhava viparyasaha, to consider the Lord as being born like ordinary mortals during his incarnations. Tadbhaktad dvesha, to hate his devotees. Tat pramana nindamcha, to condemn or hate the primordial pramanas, in other words, the Shrutis or the Vedas. These are nine significant parts of what Madhvacharya says flawed devotion, or flawed ideas. So, considering the Lord non-different from souls and considering him to be of incomplete qualities, considering someone other than him to be equal to or superior to him, and considering he himself to have inherent difference within himself, as in considering different forms of him to be different from one another, from each other, to say that he suffers the sorrows of birth, etc., in his incarnations, to hate his devotees, to criticize or hate the authorities regarding the Lord, these are all the flaws possible in devotion. Devotion that is devoid of these is called bhakti. Srimad Acharya, meaning Madhvacharya, says that just as a king puts down those subjects of his who are disloyal to him, and the Lord puts down those jivas who refuse to be loyal to him. Disloyalty to the throne can take several forms: refusing to acknowledge the king, considering oneself or another to also be the king or as powerful as the king, condemning the servants of the king, speaking ill of the dictates of the king, etc. So also disloyalty to the Lord can be put as atheism, a mistaken belief in the identity with the Lord, the worship of other deities as the Lord, attempting to hurt or harm devotees of the Lord, condemning the scriptures, etc. And while a human king is limited in his power and is also bound in his influence by space and time, the Lord faces no such limitation. Thus, whilst there exists the possibility of escaping punishment in spite of defying a king, there is none such when defying the Lord. It is seen that all of these flaws may be considered instances where one does not understand the Lord as the Purushottama, the highest person. And these are all the possible instances where proper understanding of him as being so may lapse. Thus, when such lapses are not found, bhakti exists. To quote Srimad Ananta Tirtha Madhvacharya again, continuous, ceaseless affection for the Lord, which is accompanied by proper knowledge, is called devotion, or bhakti. Sri Jayatirtha offers the following equivalent, but more explicit definition. Knowing the Lord as full of completely auspicious, infinite attributes, and maintaining a stream of unperturbed love towards him, even if there be 1,000 obstacles or problems, is bhakti. That is to say, one is not to have devotion when things are going well for oneself, but criticize him when they are not, etc., as one apt is apt to do. Excuse me. That brings us to the eighth Prameya, and let's go back to the Baldev's. So basically, so the question is basically Krishna and Rama are the same. Yes. Not that one is superior. Yes. So Sri Lakshmi is not on the same level. Well, Madhvacharya never says that. In fact, he says the opposite. Okay. So let's go back to Prameya Ratnavali. Proposition number 8. Now is mentioned that the one-pointed devotion is the cause of mukti or liberation. So we talked about what is liberation, and now we're talking about the cause of liberation, or we're going to be talking about bhakti. Previously, Madhvacharya Vyasatirtha was talking about in his proposition 8, he was talking about bhakti. So they're slightly out of sync a little bit, but anyway, now we're going to talk about bhakti. So paragraph 1, as in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad, we have the following. Devotion to this Sri Krishna is bhajan or worship. It consists of fixing one's mind in him without the desire of getting any fruit in this world or in the next. Such a devotion is called Naishkamyam, or unselfish devotion. Note, such devotion must be distinguished from the passive state of the vairagyam of the Advaitins. Vairagya means detachment of the Advaitins. Their vairagyam is also defined as non-desiring of the fruits in this world and in the next. But bhakti differs from vairagya by its more active qualities. It wants nothing but Krishna, and all objects of heaven and of earth cannot turn its heart from him. So also in the Narada Pancharatra, we have the following. Being freed from all parties and worshipping the Lord of the senses with every sense, with the utmost purity, is called bhakti. And I think that's a pretty famous verse. Sarvapari vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevaram bhakti uchate. Here it says from Narada Pancharatram. I don't know. My understanding was it was from somewhere else. But anyway, I thought it was from some Vedic text. But anyway, Narada Pancharatram it says. Paragraphs 2. This bhakti is ninefold, as is mentioned in the Bhagavad Purana 7, 5, 23, and 24. And this is very famous, of course. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Parasevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakyam Atmani Vedanam. The following are the 9 varieties of the path of devotion. The hearing of the praise of the all-pervading being Vishnu, the chanting of his praise, the remembering of him in meditation, his personal service, that is, the worship, the service of his symbolic image or deity, his worship performed by the offerings of water, flowers, fruits, etc., his salutation, placing oneself at his disposal, his friendship, that is, placing trust in him as in a friend, consecration of self in him, to him, another surrender to him. If one applies himself to this ninefold devotion of Vishnu, having learned it from his teacher, I consider it to be the best lesson he has received from his master. When the service of the good and holy men and that of one's own guru is done with love and reverence, thinking upon them as if they were God personified, and then only is obtained this bhakti for the Lord and not otherwise. Paragraph 3. That good and holy men should be served with the same reverence as one pays to God is shown in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Let thy guest be to thee like unto a god. Atiti devo bhava is the statement of the Upanishad. The word guest here means that holy man who is a houseless wanderer. And also in the Bhagavad Purana 7, 5, 32, it's shown that by such service, bhakti is obtained. Till they do not purify themselves by ablution in the dust of the feet of the great saints, who have taken the vow of poverty, their understanding might not comprehend the greatness of the feet of the Lord of mighty strides, I'm referring to Trivikram Avatar, Vaman Trivikram Avatar. And it is by this means that the evils of life are to be removed. Note, the Lord of Mighty Strides is Vishnu, who in his Vamana avatar, dwarf incarnation, encompassed the space between the earth, heaven, and Patala, meaning the hellish planets, by his 3 steps, paragraph 4. The service to the teacher must be done with full reverence, as one would serve his God, as is shown in Taittiriya Upanishad 1:11-2. And here we have another from the very similar place in the Upanishad. Acharya Devo Bhava. Let thy teacher be to thee like unto a god. To the same effect as the following verse in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6:23. Yasya Devi Parabhaktir Yata Deve Tata Guru Tasya Ite Katita Hyasya Prakashante Mahatmanaha. Prakashante Mahatmana iti. If these truths have been told to a high-minded man who feels the highest devotion for God and for his guru as for God, then they will shine forth. Then they will shine forth indeed. So also in the Bhagavad Purana, it's mentioned that by such devotion to guru, one gets bhakti for the Lord. So that's the verse, Tasmad Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasu Shreyavuttavam. Therefore, let the seeker for Brahman, the highest good, approach a guru or teacher who is the master of all the Vedas, Shabda Brahman, and who constantly dwells in the supreme Brahman in order to get mukti or liberation. Therefore, let him take shelter of such a guru who has obtained calmness. There let him learn the Bhagavad Dharmas, treating his guru as his God and serving him without crookedness. For by such service the Lord Hari is pleased, who has given his body and soul to his bhaktas. Paragraph 5. He who is purified with the 5 sacraments, meaning the Panchasamskarams, right, and has got the 2 sorts of bhakti, he realizes Hari and rejoices forever in his abode. Interesting. So Panchasamskara is written, is so Shravapta or Avapta, Panchasamskaro, Labda, Dvirvida Bhaktika. So 2 types of bhakti. Sakshat Kritya Harim Tasya Damni Nityam Pramodate. Paragraph 6. 5 sacraments are thus mentioned in the Shmiti Padma Purana. Tapa Pundram Tata Nama Mantro Yagascha Panchamaha. Amihi Panchasamskaraha Paramaikanti Hetavaha. The 5 sacraments are: 1. Heating or branding the body with the symbols of Hari. 2. Putting the caste mark or tilak. 3. Giving the name of Hari to one's children and naming oneself also as a servant of Hari. 4. Prayer. And 5. Sacrifice. These 5 samskaras are verily conducive to one-pointed devotion. No, Madhvas do not do some Pancha Samskara. The question was whether Madhvas do Pancha Samskara. No, they don't. So this is interesting because this is adopted from Pancharatra. And although Madhvas do Tapta Mudra Dharanam, but they don't do it as an initiation. They do it once a year on Shayana Dwadasi on the first day of Chaturmasya. So this is interesting. So this is adopted. Baladev is adopting this. He's writing this obviously as a Gaudiya who's adopting this from Pancharatra. But this is the same verse was quoted by the Sri Vaishnavas also. And I believe Nimbarka is quoted also the same verse. So the word tapa or heating here means putting on the body the marks of discus, etc., with heated metals, Besides branding, it includes also the writing of the name of Hari on one's body with sandal paste or proper seals. Okay, so he's added something here where he says in the second line here, Harinamadi Mudra. But it doesn't say where that actually comes from. It's also mentioned in the following Shmriti. Let him mark his body with sandalwood paste with the syllables of the name of Hari. Such a person purifies the world while alive and after death obtains the world of Hari. And then we have some more statements here, which we don't know where they're from. The caste mark must be a straight perpendicular line on the forehead and called Urdhva Pundram. The scriptures describe their various kinds. It may represent the temple of Hari and is a reminder that that his body is a temple of God, of the God. According to others, it should be like the foot of Hari, showing that one is a servant of God. The tilak is a most auspicious mark. The giving of the name means that one must bear such a name which should express the servant of God, such as Haridas, etc. The mantra must be the Vaishnava mantra consisting of 18 syllables. That's the Gopala mantra, which is the main Gaudiya mantra of initiation. And the rest means that there could be other mantras also. It's considered to be the body of one's Istadevata. So that mantra is considered to be non-different from the Lord. That it talks about. The word worship or yaga means the puja of Shalagram and the rest, Shalagram and also other murtis. Holy men should find out from Puranas the detailed account and authorities for these 5 sacraments. Paragraph 7. The ninefold bhakti is of 2 sorts. Okay, so we originally heard it was of 2 sorts, namely Vidhi Bhakti and Ruchi Bhakti. So this would equate to Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. Through any one of these, Lord Krishna, being pleased, gives to his devotees all that they desire. Paragraph 8. Through Vidhi Bhakti, the God is worshipped as having a form with 4, 8, or 10 arms. With Ruchi Bhakti, he's worshipped as a man with 2 arms, such as the son of Yashoda or Kaushalya. So that means Krishna or Rama. The distinction between Ruchi Bhakti and Vidhi Bhakti is clearly brought out in this verse. In Vidhi Bhakti, God is worshipped as something supremely great and above humanity. The very form as having 4, 8, or 10 arms cuts him off from the category of man. Such a being may be an object of adoration, of awe and fear, but he can hardly be an object of that intense love that man feels for man. Therefore, in Ruchi Bhakti, God is worshipped as a man, and that also as an infant child suckling at the breast of Yashoda or of Kaushalya. This Ruchi Bhakti is the subject of much controversy among the antiquarians. Some say that this child worship is not the original Bhakti of India, but has been introduced here from Christianity. Okay, so this is all, the notes are all by Vasu, the translator. Paragraph 9. He should worship the Tulsi, the Ashwata, and the Dhatri trees, and should try to dwell as far as possible in cities like Mathura and the rest. He should fast on the Lord's day, called the 11th day of the moon, meaning Ekadasi. If this Ekadasi day of the moon does not commence with the break of dawn, Arundaya, then he should reject it. Similarly, he should observe the birthday festivity that falls on the 8th day of the moon, meaning Janmashtami. But if this Astami Tithi does not commence at sunrise, but afterwards, then it should be rejected and the nativity should be observed on the next day. Note, the observance of Ekadasi and Janmashtami is a peculiar feature of the Vaishnavas. If the Tithi does not commence at dawn, but after that moment, then it is not observed on that day. Thus, if at the time of 2 muhurtas, means 96 minutes, because the muhurta is 48 minutes, right? Before the sunrise, there is dasami, right? when we're talking about Ekadasi, not when we're talking about Janmashtami. When we talk about Ekadasi, the 11th day of the Lord, if it's still the 10th lunar day, 96 minutes before sunrise, right? Similarly, if the Janmashtami has Saptami, the 7th day instead of the 8th day, at the time of sunrise, it should be rejected. The force is on the words Aruna, dawn, and Surya, sun. The rising of the dawn is generally 1.5 hours before that of the sun. So the dawn comes in at this time, which is usually called Brahma Muhurta, which is 2 Muhurtas or 96 minutes, an hour and 36 minutes before sunrise for 48 minutes. In the case of Ekadasi, it must be seen whether at the time of the break of dawn, there is that Titi or not. If at that time the Titi is not Ekadasi but Dasami, then that day should be rejected. That, in other words, that day should be completely known as Dasami, or that day should be completely known as Saptami in the case of Janmashtami. Right. So if at that time the Titi is not Ekadasi but Dasami, then that day should be rejected. For in the case of other sacred days like Janmashtami and the rest, dawn is not to be looked into, but the actual sunrise. Okay, so what he's saying here is that for Ekadasi, especially for Ekadasi, it is the rule is Brahma Muhurta has to be the 96 minutes before sunrise. There has to be the Ekadasi Tithi has to be present and not Dasami. But for Janmashtami, it's simply the dawn. It's simply the sunrise, the actual sunrise time. If it's Astami at the time of sunrise. If at the time of sunrise there is not the proper Tithi, then that day should not be observed as sacred, but the next day. Excuse me. So, paragraph 10, desirous of maintaining the social order, the wise devotee should observe regularly the obligatory and the optional duties, nitya and naimittika karmas, but always giving preeminence to bhakti. Note, the bhaktas are of 3 kinds, svanishta, parinishta, and nirapeksha. Among these, the first must perform all duties, that's his svanishta, excepting those which entail loss of life, such as animal sacrifices of his ashrama. Without desiring the fruit of those actions, he must observe all rituals. The last Nirapeksha, observes no ritual. His worship is mental, and he is always mentally devoted to the Lord. He, being in no ashrama, is bound by no rules of convention. The third, Parinishta, which was mentioned in the middle here, being midway between these two, does not stand in need of performing ritualistic karmas, but being a respectable member of society, he observes all the conventions of the society in order to maintain social order. Okay, so that's interesting. Paragraph 11. Let him avoid with care the 10 sorts of blasphemy called namaparada, or sins against the name. These 10 sins are as follows. There are the following. Number 1, satam ninda, speaking ill of the holy men. 2, meditating on Shiva and others as independent deities while worshipping Vishnu. That is to say, uttering the names of Shiva and other deities with the idea of their independence in the presence of Vishnu. 3, showing contempt to one's guru or person whom one ought to revere. 4, speaking ill of the Shruti or revelation, the Vedas, and of other scriptures which are in accordance with such Shrutis. 5, thinking that the name of the Lord has no efficacy to remove all sins. In other words, disbelief in the efficacy of the sacred name, and thinking that materials regarding this efficacy are merely eulogistic and not to be taken in their literal sense. 6, trying to explain such statements regarding the efficacy of the name by other methods. 7, believing in the efficacy of the name, but committing sins on the strength of such efficacy, thinking, let me commit sins. I shall utter the name of the Lord, and all the sins will be washed away. This is willful commission of sins. This willful commission of sins is bad. 8, thinking of any other good works, such as charities, pujas, etc., can equal to the utterance of the holy name. In other words, denying the preeminence of the name. 9, teaching the name to a person who has no faith in it or who is actively opposed to it. 10, not loving the name even after hearing its glory. These are the 10 sins against the name which the bhaktas must avoid. Paragraph 12. Bhakti, whose fruit is the attainment of Krishna, is called here ekanta bhakti, or one-pointed bhakti. When it is preceded by knowledge and dispassion, it at once produces its fruit. Note, the ekanta bhakti by herself is sufficient to lead to mukti, or liberation. But when it's accompanied by jnana, or knowledge, and vairagya, detachment, its action is quickened and mukti, or liberation, is more quickly attained. Thus ends the eighth proposition of Prameya Ratnavali, in which is shown that pure bhakti is the giver of mukti. Proposition 9. Should we have a look? Should we have a look at Vyasatirtha and see what it was Vyasatirtha's 8? Did we already do Vyasatirtha's 8? Yes. The 8th Prameya, or 8th proposition according to Vyasatirtha, is the triad of Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Shabda, the 3 pramanas, or means of valid cognition, or true knowledge, right, are indeed the sources of valid knowledge. The word pramana is defined by Ananda Tirtha using the statement, that which is as is, that which is as is a pramana. This is the definition of the word pramana. But what is the definition of something? What does it mean to define something? If there is an entity to be defined, which we refer to as a lakshya, then a property called a lakshana, right? A lakshana is the property of something which is something to be defined. A lakshya must be given for it. A lakshana must be given for it, a quality. This statement of a property is a definition. But what kind of property is suitable for use in the definition? Sri Jayatirtha says, a property that extends only to the entity to be described is a lakshana. So his definition of a lakshana is that it's a quality that inheres in a particular thing, which isn't in anything else. It's the distinguishing feature of a thing, right? It's not that. So, for example, we have cows and horses. Cows have 4 legs, and horses also have 4 legs. So we can't say that the quality, the lakshana of a cow is having 4 legs, right? Because that doesn't distinguish it from other 4-legged animals. Whatever it distinguishes it, the distinguishing feature, the thing which it has that no other thing has, right, is its distinguishing feature. So that is the lakshana. Considering the case of a cow, if one has to specify what one means by a cow, then how does one do it? One cannot say the cow has 4 feet, because many animals do, and this specification has a flaw of ati-vyapti, or excess over legitimate domain, right? So it's not a proper lakshana. One cannot say that cows are white with brown spots on their skin, because not all cows are like this, and this specification would be called avyapti, or not extending to all cases of the defined. A proper lakshana is given by the following. A cow is that which has a flap of loose skin hanging from its throat, which is called a dewlap, right? Other properties like 4-leggedness, etc., to be added in support of this one. Thus, just as the property of having a loose flap of skin at the throat is unique to the cow and is thus a lakshana for a cow, the property of being yatartha, as is unique to the pramana and is a lakshana for the pramana. Therefore, the pramana lakshana is given yatartam pramanaha, right? Rather than in any other way. Sri Ananda Tirtha further says that pramanam is of 2 kinds. kevala pramanam, and anupramanam. So the knowledge which is as is called kevala, right? Self-understood, right? Self-proving. The source of that, the source of that, the previous, is anupramana, right? After such further discussion about kevala pramana, he says, anupramana is of three types: pratyaksha, anumana, and agama, meaning shabda, or agama means authoritative statement. Thus, generally speaking, the word pramana is often applied to refer to this kind. In the Prameya shloka, Sri Vyasatirtha applies it so. So, in fact, the three kinds of anupramana are what are mentioned as a triad of pratyaksha, anumana, and shabda, or agama, in the verse. The flawless interaction between the sense organ and its entity in its domain is called pratyaksha. In another context, Sri Madhva has also quoted the Brahmatarka statement: the sense organ that is flawlessly situated upon a subject of its observation is known as pratyaksha. Similarly, he gives a quote from there saying, inference, that is without flaw, constitutes logic. What are the flaws of inference? Atmashraya, Anyonyashraya, Chakrakashraya, Anavasta, Kalpana Gaurava, Shrutahana, Drishtahana are the flaws of influence. Please look at the glossary of logical errors for the meanings of these terms. No, we're not going to look at that. Similarly, agama is defined as flawless textual evidence is agama. Thus, in every case, it is not necessary for something to have certain positive qualification in order to qualify as a pramana. The mere fact of a flaw is considered sufficient. That is to say, the quality of being a pramana, which is called pramanya, is inherent in a source of knowledge unless such property is vitiated by a flaw. Any source of knowledge is assumed to convey, as is, exact information unless there's a reason to believe otherwise. But how? Certain schools of thought hold that all sources of knowledge are flawed by themselves, and that thus it is not possible to qualify a source of knowledge as a pramana except upon support from another source. Srimad Ananda Tirtha says, Madhvacharya says, the quality of being a pramana is of the same nature, self-same nature of the source only, otherwise an infinite regress results. Okay, the quality of being a pramana is of the self-same nature of the source only, otherwise an infinite regress results. Just consider, if any one pramana has to be qualified by another in order to be effective, then there has to be a third to qualify the second, and so on without end, with no end. Yeah. There cannot ever be any valid knowledge at all in that case. To avoid that situation, one must accept that the property of validity is inherent in the source of knowledge unless such is vitiated by a flaw. But how does one know that there is a flaw somewhere? What is the source of such knowledge of flaw? Srimad Acharya, Madhvacharya states, when many pramanas or a stronger pramana oppose a single source, then the latter's apramanya or non-validity is seen, as in the case of the shell appearing as silver. So there's a very famous, we'll talk about it here, a very famous example. A famous example given in Vedanta is that a seashell being seen in poor light and of its glint in that light appearing to be that of silver, thus leading to the mistaking of the shell for a silver object. If one picks up the shell and observes it not to be made of silver, then the stronger evidence of one's closer and careful observation is used to dismiss the earlier one as unsatisfactory. But it may be argued that apramanya is known when a flaw is seen. So What's this about opposing a stronger or many pramanas, etc.? It is not to be said that the previous is incorrect because apramanya is always born of flaw, for there exists a rule that opposition to many or stronger pramanas is born of flaw. Further consideration, it is not to be said that the previous is incorrect because apramanya is always born of flaw, for there exists a rule that opposition to many or stronger pramanas is born of flaw. Further clarification. The fact of the source being vitiated by flaw is known only by its opposition to stronger evidence. Coming back to the Prameya shloka, quote, akshadi trayam hi pramanam. There are two parts to the issue. One, pratyaksha, anumana, and shabda or agama are pramanas, and that may not be dismissed as being so, as not being so. And two, that there exists no source of exact knowledge which is not covered under these three. So there's two parts to it, right? So one is that there are these three pramanas, proper pramanas, pratyaksha, anumana, and agama, right? And that there's nothing to be known which cannot be known by these three. So for the latter point, one has to consider that there are certain types of pramana given by some other schools of thought. For instance, the following: artapati. This is defined by something obtained or derived by exclusion is called artapati. An example of this is given by the famous Devadatta is very stout. He does not eat during the daytime. So Devadatta is fat, right? But he does not eat during the daytime. So we don't see him eating, but we know he doesn't eat in the daytime. Therefore, the conclusion is that he eats at night because he's fat, right? Otherwise, how could he be fat? By excluding all except a certain case and knowing that in one of the cases must hold, one considers whatever case is not excluded to be true. And this type of pramana is called artapati. Upamana. Upamana is defined like this: upon perceiving a similarity with some entity that has been seen before, that knowledge of similarity is known as upamana. For instance, knowing a forest fire to be of a similar nature as a kitchen fire and coming to know that it must be very hot. Abhava is a third one. This literally means absence, so that perception of some entity's absence is held to be an independent pramana. For instance, entering into an empty room and observing the absence of a person one is looking for. With regard to these, Srimad Acharya, Madhvacharya says, right, how so? Because it is possible to state an inference rule so that given the conditions of the artapati or upamana, right, one can arrive at its conclusion. In fact, it turns out that such an inference is unconsciously applied in such a case. Sri Jayatirtha says in his commentary on Vishnu Tattva Vinirnaya, just like the Kuru Pandava relationship, which is used to indicate difference between ordinary and special, it should be understood that artapati, etc., are included as part of anumana, right? Right. So artapat, all these others, artapati and abhava and upamana, right? These are all considered as part of anumana. Yeah. Sri Srinivas Tirtha, the author of the sub-commentary upon many of Madhvacharya's works, says in his Vyakyartha Dipika, as commentary upon the statement of Jayatirtha, just as the Pandavas were special cases of the Kauravas and were thus referred to as those separate, so also artapati, etc., upamana and abhava, right, are special cases of anumana and are thus separately referred to, and it is thus not at all appropriate to exclude them from the purview of Anumana. This is the meaning. Sri Madhva has further said, Abhava is subsumed under Anumana, Pratyaksha, and Agama. There can be three kinds because an Anupramana can not only give knowledge of presence, it can also give a knowledge of absence. A sense organ can also perceive the absence of whatever entity it is capable of perceiving. The ear can detect a sound as well as silence. The eye, light as well as darkness. Similarly, absence may also be inferred or known from textual evidence. Thus, any specific case of absence can be deduced to one of the three given pramanas. So any one of the three given pramanas, pratyaksha, anumana, and shabda, can also be known by their absence, abhava, right? So abhava is not a separate pramana. Neither is upamana or what was the first one? Upamana and artapati. Yeah. So all of those three are part of anumana or inference, logical inference. So that we're talking about is the pramanas. The ninth proposition by Baladev is about prajaksha, anumana, and shabda. So that will be having to do with what we just talked about from the Madhva point of view, and we can see the contrast. Okay, proposition 9. Now it is being shown that the means of right knowledge are perception, inference, and word only. Paragraph 1. It is thus stated in the Bhagavata. The means of right knowledge are fourfold, namely revelation, perception, rumor, and inference. Note, the Bhagavata thus mentions four means of right knowledge. How do you then say that there are three only? The question is answered in the next paragraph. Paragraph 2. Since rumor is included in perception, therefore the teacher has said that the means of right knowledge are three. Among these, Shruti is the highest. Note, rumor is a form of perception and is included in perception. Thus, there dwells a ghost in this fig tree. This is a rumor. It must have originated with the person who saw the ghost and gave currency to the statement. It may be that his perception was a hallucination, but all the same, every such statement is included in perception. The word teacher in the above paragraph means Madhvacharya. Manu also, 12.105, has mentioned three pramanas only. The three kinds of evidence, perception, inference, and the sacred institutes, which comprise the tradition of many schools, must be fully understood by him who desires perfect correctness with respect to the sacred law. Paragraph 3. Perception and inference are subsidiary to the word because they are corrected by means of the word. Perception is liable to become deceptive, as when one sees a magic head, etc. Similarly, inference is also liable to mistake, as when a fire is extinguished on a hill through rain and the smoke rises from such extinguished fire. But the inference that there is still fire on the hill will be erroneous, merely because there is smoke. Therefore, perception and inference are not independent means of right knowledge. This is a little bit different because it seems like what Madhvacharya is saying is that they're independent means of right knowledge. The highest means the right knowledge is the word or the valid testimony or the opinion of experts. It is only statements made by them, whether such statements are embodied in a revelation called the word of God or in books of science and art. The word of godlike men alone is the primary means of right knowledge. Every man's own perception and inference constitute only a very small and secondary part or secondary means of right knowledge. And the knowledge so acquired forms only an infinitesimally small part of the whole store of his knowledge. One's own perception tells that the earth is flat, but the Shruti or science declares that the earth is round. And so perception gives way to the word of the expert. Similarly, it is a wrong inference when one says that the sun moves from east to west. The right inference is that what the Shruti of science declares, that it is the motion of the earth on its axis that causes the appearance of the motion of the sun in heaven. Hence, Shabda and the word is superior to sensuous perception and inference both. Paragraph 4. The reasoning which supports the Shruti is the right argumentation, but the reasoning that tries to go against it is a mere dry controversy and should be avoided. Note, the authority for this is to be found in the next paragraph, paragraph 5. Thus, the Vajrayanayans, means the Shukla Yajurvedants, right? Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 245 say, verily, the self, Hari, is to be seen directly perceived. The method for which is that he is to be heard from the teachings given by a Vedic guru. He is to be cogitated upon by reasonings in accordance with the Vedas. He is to be meditated upon. And to the same effect in the text of the Katakas, the Kata Upanishad 2.9, this belief, which thou hast got, cannot be brought about, nor should it be destroyed by argument not based upon Vedas. When taught by the true teacher, the self becomes easily realized. O dearest, strong is thy resolution. Inquirers like thee, O Nachiketas, are not many. So this is Yama speaking to Nachiketas, the boy Nachiketas in Kata Upanishad. Paragraph 6. So, also, there is the following Shmriti. Tarka, or right argument, is the reasoning that tries to find out the proper interpretation of a text, so that it may not conflict with what precedes it and what follows it. So in context, in other words, any other argument is dry and vain argument and should be avoided. Since the non-knower of the Vedas cannot know Brahman, and in them the Brahmic intuition does not originate, and since Brahman is said to be Upanishadam, or known through the Upanishads, hence the Shruti or revelation is considered to be the principal means of right knowledge. As an authority for the same are the following Shrutis. The non-knower of Vedas cannot conceive that great one. I ask thee about the Upanishadam Purusham, the person revealed by the Upanishads, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 3.9.26. Here ends the 9th proposition dealing with the threefold means of right knowledge in Prameya Ratnavali. Epilogue. The author now shows that the 9 propositions proved by him in the preceding portion are not invented by him, but were taught by the founder of this sect, namely by Madhvacharya himself. Thus, it has been said by the ancients, according to the doctrine of Madhva, Hari is the supreme. The world is real. Separateness is true. The individual souls are infinitely graded as superior and inferior and are dependent upon God. Liberation is self-realization, consisting in the enjoyment of such bliss as remained latent in the soul. Pure bhakti, devotion, is the means of this end. Perception, inference, and testimony are the sources of knowledge, measures of proof, mundane and heavenly. Hari is knowable in the entirety of the Vedas and by the Vedas alone. Note, this verse, which has traditionally come down from the time of Sri Madhva, sums up the 9 prameyas, or propositions, thus. Hari Paratara, Hari is supreme. Satyam Jagat, the world is real. Tattvaha Bedaha, separateness is true. Jatva Jnana Hare Anuchara, the individual souls are servants of God and dependent on him. Nichocha Bhavam Gata, and are graded as superior and inferior according to their karmas. Muktir Naijashuka Anubhutihi. Liberation is the experiencing of the bliss belonging to the essential form of the soul. Amala Bhaktishcha Tat Sadhanam, pure bhakti devotion, is the means to this end. Akshadi Tritayam Pramanam. Perception, inference, and testimony are the three means of right knowledge. Akila amnaya eka vedyo harihi. Hari is to be known by the entirety of the Vedas, and all the scriptures establish his existence and qualities. This Prameya Ratnavali should be kept in their hearts with reverence by the wise, as it contains the 9 gems or ratnas of propositions well proven, Prameya, as they were composed by Ananda Tirtha, Sri Madhvacharya. Let Murari, whose self Atman, is intelligence, Chaitanya, ever dwell in our heart, through whose grace the Lord of Elephants, Gajapati, right, became free from fault and full of happiness. This has a double meaning, of course, right? So here ends Prameya Ratnavali. Note, the last verse has a double meaning. It refers to Gajapati, meaning, which is a name of the poet called Gopala Das, as well as to the king of Orissa called Pratiparudra. Gajapati also refers to the elephant attacked by the alligator that was saved by Hari, Gajendra, right? There is a play also on the word Chaitanya. All right, so that's the end of Prameya Ratnavali. Now let's have a quick look at let's see if we can finish the Madhva version of it, because the Madhvas have their last Pramana. The last Prameya is, the 9th Prameya of Vyasatirtha, is the meaning of Amnaya is given in the following verse. So the last Prameya that they have is, all the Vedas speak solely of Hari. The meaning of Amnaya, meaning here it's Akila Amnaya Eka Vedo Harihi, right? Amnaya is given in the following verse, conjunct split. The Vedas are called Veda for being eternally present, because they're always heard rather than composed. They're called Shruti. They are called Amnaya for being recited without difference, for being unchanged over all time. They have all these qualities because they are present in the mind of Ishvara, Vishnu, at all times. Therefore, the word Amnaya is in the quote refers to the Vedas with special reference to the quality of their unchanging nature over all time. The Prameya is that the entire corpus of the unchanging Vedas speaks primarily of Hari Vishnu only. As Srimad Ananda Tirtha Madhvacharya puts it, the primary meaning of all agamas is the supremacy of Vishnu only. And he also says, all words in the scriptures primarily refer to the one Janardana. Even the unexpressed karma referring portions, the karma kanda of the Vedas, refer to him whose nature is boundless. Scriptural evidence in support of this proposition is not scant. As seen from the earlier Prameya, we have Krishna's statement in the Gita, Vedaischa sarve aham eva vedyo. The Vedas and their adjunct texts, like the Itihasas and Puranas, all speak of me only. We also have from the Mahavaraha Purana, right? The chief import of all Vedas is the supremacy of the Lord of Shri, Vishnu. Right, so that we have this, maybe this is the last verse given here. It means that doctrine which quells all positions arising out of ignorance and deceit is called Tattvavada, the truth, right? Ananda Tirtha Madhvacharya, the august amongst saints who propounded the supremacy of Hari all over, I salute. Bharati Ramana Mukhya Pranantargata Sri Krishna Paramastu Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Thus is the end of this thing here, according to Vyasatirtha. So we finished a comparison between Prameya Ratnavali of the Gaudiyas, which is said to be based upon Madhva's philosophy, and with Madhva's actual philosophy, as pointed out in a sloka of 9 principal doctrines given by Vyasatirtha.
Yeah.
So what do you think? A little different.
Yeah. It's a few points are different. There's some commonality, but yeah.
But you notice the Madhvas say Pratyaksha Anumana are a separate means of true knowledge, separate from Agama, and they say Agama, right? They use the word Agama, or Shrut. They say Shruti sometimes, or Agama, like that, and the Gaudiyas say Pratyakshyanumana and Shabda, and they define Shabda differently. They say it's the statements of experts, right? Not necessarily meaning the Veda, right? But Madhvas really say it's the Veda, but also the Itihasas and Puranas backing up the Veda, but not going against the Veda.
Yeah. Yeah, some difference.
Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya.